Germany goes to the polls on Sunday with consequences for all of Europe. This might be the week that changed Europe's economy as the market started to price in dramatically higher defence spending and the US administration demanded it should reach 5% of European nations' GDP. That will have to be paid for though, and the question is how? Well, Carsten Brzeski is Global Head of Macro for ING Research. Carsten, Germany has historically been reluctant to borrow for defence spending or anything else. Could this election change that?
It could, and I think it has to, because when you look at the German economy, has been in a de facto stagnation since early 2020. The German economy also has an investment gap of some 600 billion euro, kind of a build-up over the last decade. So Germany needs to invest. Germany needs to invest in infrastructure, in digitalization, in education, and now also in defense. And you cannot do that with just cutting expenditures. So Germany will have to go all in, and after the elections, any new government will either have to make the famous debt brake more flexible, or find, for example, a special purpose vehicle to find additional spending room.
Going to that famous federal debt brake, how willing do you think politicians are to reform it?
Well, it first of all depends really on the seat distribution in Parliament, because any new government would need a 2/3 majority in Parliament in order to really get it through to get a constitutional change. So that might not be the case. So what will happen then is that the next government will find other ways. And they, for example, could go for something like an escape clause. So just, exempt the debt brake from the constitutional obligations for a couple of years. That would be one way forward. Or the other way, and I think the easier way forward would be to come up with some kind of investment fund. So really targeted spending, special purpose vehicle, for example, in the form of an infrastructure investment fund or a modernized Germany investment fund. So really where you have then dedicated money with a specific target, namely to increase investments and to increase potential growth of the German economy.
To boost defence spending in particular at the European level, might we see a move towards German support for Eurobonds or some form of collective borrowing?
Yeah, very, very good question here. Of course, non-German politician would dare talking about Eurobonds ahead of the elections. We know that these discussions can easily change the day after the elections. And when you just look at the numbers, you mentioned it. So we're currently in Europe at something like 2% of GDP on defense spending. NATO talked about increasing it to 3.6% of GDP. Indeed, the US administration has even mentioned 5% of GDP. But let's assume it has to be an additional 2% of GDP every single year. This cannot be done alone by national governments, because otherwise we would be back in a situation that we saw actually in the first year of the pandemic, namely every European country going on its own. Then we will see that the highly indebted countries have much more problems, will be penalized by financial markets. ECB has to step in the end, we will still have a European solution. So to cut a long story short, I think after the German elections, we will see an opening for something. We won't call it Eurobonds, but again, project bonds, a special European vehicle to support financing of defense spending.
You mentioned being penalised by financial markets. How are you expecting the bond markets to react to more borrowing for defence?
Well, a bit what we saw over the last couple of days. I think right now markets are playing the idea that we will get European spending. And this is why, on the one hand, we saw longer-term interest rates going up, but at the same time the spreads between Germany and Italy, for example, or other or peripheral countries remaining pretty stable. So that is this idea that we were all in it in one boat. If we were to see a national solution first and only then going along also the European solution, I would expect that we will see financial markets reacting differently, namely in kind of discriminating between low debt countries and high debt countries. So if the European message would be we first go in only with national solutions, then we would see a widening of spreads definitely again.
That was Carsten Brzeski of ING. Don't forget you can watch more videos on Reuters.com.